Okay, we are back, folks, and we have Jesse Ventura, former Minnesota governor, with us. They killed our president. 63 reasons to believe there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. And hopefully it'll become a bestseller because people need to be woken up out there about the coup d'etat that took over our country. Former Minnesota governor Jesse Ventura, multi-time, #1 New York Times bestseller. And he's giving us the premiere interview here today. His book tour, TV tour, starts next week, a limited tour on national TV and radio. But he said he'd give me the first interview, and we're very honored to have him, and I count him as a friend. And the reason I admire Jesse Ventura, even though I don't agree with him 100%, he doesn't agree with me 100%, is that he's a real guy. And being genuine nowadays is getting so rare.
Share this video with a friend.
Well, let me tell you a brief story, and this is on YouTube. I did the interview now it's about 5-6 years ago. George Norrie came to town. We put on a big event. Thousands came out for 5:90 a.m., our local affiliate, KLBJ, the namesake of the president. He actually used to own it. And this distinguished older gentleman comes up with his distinguished son who was older and said, "I'm Mr. Grody. I own the funeral home, and I want to tell you, Alex, I came here because you're here." I was up there, signing stuff. He said, "I'd like to do an interview. I've decided I'm pretty old," but he was still very sharp. He said, "I only owned one funeral home then." And he said the FBI came in with Lee Harvey Oswald, put ink on his hand, ink, and then put it on the rifle in front of me, and then told me, "Shut up." And then when they buried him there, they came back a week later, dug it up, and basically ran off with the body. And he came there in the morning, and it was all dug up and gone. And then I said to him and he and his son, I said, "All right, well, next week I'll come out to your home." And it was up there in the hills overlooking, big mansion. As it turned out, they own one of the biggest funeral home chains in Texas. Ended up being very successful. And I'm driving, and they're not there. And I later learned, on the way to meet us at their house, a big truck came in and ran them off the road into the ditch and almost killed them, Jesse.
No kidding.
No, that's a true story.
Really?
Yep.
Well, we cover that portion in the book because, initially when the weapon was sent off to the FBI and then it came back, there were no prints on it at all could be found. And then lo and behold, and then we do talk about that guy because, he did go public, and it's in my book also, that he verified that Oswald's hand had what do you call it, all over it after they left.
Yeah, they didn't just, because he broke it to me, and he's the guy. He said they didn't just take his hand and get it to put it on there. They put the prints on with ink, he said.
Right. And
it's just amazing. And Jesse, imagine this, and maybe it's a coincidence, but the family said, "That's it, we're done, this is very suspicious." And then he was 90, he was like 90 then. I don't even know if he's alive now. I need to find out. Very nice guy, but he was sharp. And he said, "I'm ready to tell the truth of what happened." And just a Texan, and then he got ran off the road with his wife, coming to meet me to officially put it on the record.
Wow. Well, they did the same thing to Lee Bowers.
Yep.
Who was the gentleman that was in the tower at the railroad yard that day and saw the suspicious stuff behind the fence. Lee Bowers was later found dead in what allegedly was supposedly a one-car accident, but if you talk to the sheriff doing the report, the official report, they actually showed that he too was run off the road.
I know you know probably more about the Kennedy thing than I do because you focus on it more. How many people does Mars and others say died suspiciously after?
Oh, there's a huge amount. We cover the most important. One of the biggest we cover is Dorothy Kilgallen.
Oh, yeah.
Dorothy Kilgallen was the syndicated columnist, big name from New York, who went on a rampage when Kennedy was killed, and she wanted the truth. She didn't buy it. She's actually the only person that did a one-on-one interview with Jack Ruby, and when she came out from that interview, she stated, "I'm going to bust the Kennedy assassination wide open." Well, we cover a whole chapter of the book on her, and she went home, she was murdered, and all her transcripts that she had were stolen, and get this, she had been savvy and smart enough to make duplicate copies copies, and her friend had them. A week later, the friend died, and hers were gone too.
Unbelievable.
We cover that all in this book. This book, I'll tell you, it's a fascinating read for people. People that love to read Tom Clancy and Vince Flynn and all that stuff, they're all good. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking. Those guys got great imaginations. They're fantastic writers. But what intrigues me more about going after Kennedy is the people are real. You're not dealing with figments of imagination or anything. You're dealing with real facts that went on. And assembling the jigsaw puzzle is the real challenge, fun part for me about it, is because that's what it's like. It's like a huge jigsaw puzzle thrown on the floor. And you have to take every bit of evidence and start piecing it together till you figure out what the picture is. And then when the picture comes to you, you get some closure because you truly understand that I do not believe Lee Harvey Oswald ever fired a shot.
Well, clearly we know that he was basically CIA sheep-dipped. He was at that secret base in Japan. He was sent to infiltrate the Russians, allowed back in after he supposedly had, joined the Russians. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's hanging out with the white Russian community.
Well, one of the easy reasons that it's so is that one of the documents they won't release even today is Lee Harvey Oswald's tax return.
That's right.
And I mean, how can that be national security? Where he made his money, his national security, and how much he made. See, they don't dare release it because if the trail led back to the government, the paper trail of the money of being paid, well, that again changes the whole scenario of what they told us. And to me, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the Warren Report is completely fraudulent. People need to understand when the government, when you allow them to investigate themselves, that's putting the fox right in the hen house. And I realize it would be difficult. How do you get an independent civilians to investigate the government? But that's what needs to happen, because when they form these commissions, they're just to rubber stamp whatever the government's position is on whatever it might be. And that's all that they do. And yet then the government uses them as the final thing, and then they won't answer any more questions on the subject because the Warren Commission said it, the 9/11 Commission said it, whatever the commission might be that says that this is, and they always come out exactly with the government's original story. That's why they call it the official story, Alex. It's generally used to protect officials.
Well, sure, the old British saying, no, you're right. The old British saying is, don't believe something until it's been officially denied.
Yeah.
Because we're on the subject of JFK with the 50th anniversary coming up, before we get back into war, I want to ask you here today, do you agree with me and others that this is when we really saw the shadow government begin its ongoing coup d'etat? For me, that's why this is historically so important. This is when our country really started to become a tyranny.
I agree completely. I at least in my lifetime, granted, I was only 12 years old when this happened, but I agree, Alex, that it was the murder of John F. Kennedy. It was a coup d'etat. People in this country got to stop being in denial, and they got to start realizing that assassinations of presidents happen all the time through history, and generally they are always conspiracies. There's not one person that does it. And it's ridiculous in this country that every assassination that takes place in this country, it's always a lone nut. And it's always done to a person who stands for peace. John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, John Lennon. All four of them stood for what? Peace. Ending a war. Great transition into war, isn't it, Alex? Mainstream media won't cover anything that does not have the government stamp of approval on it. And I think people need to wake up to that and understand that they all have... I mean, look at Bill O'Reilly. I saw videotape from my friend Russ Baker, showed it to me, of Bill O'Reilly on Current Affair demanding an investigation of JFK's murder. This is way back in the 80s when new information had just come to light. O'Reilly's on there demanding that the government open up and investigate and tell us the truth about the murder of Kennedy, and yet today he writes a multi-million-dollar best-selling book, all putting forth the myth that Oswald did it. He didn't really, that wasn't the reason for the book, but it was a book on Kennedy. But the conclusion was, of course, and that's where O'Reilly stands today, that Oswald acted alone. Now, what caused him to change his mind in those 25 years or 20 years? Money.
Well, it shows why the Kennedy assassination is so important to the establishment, because 90+% in major polls, as you know, believe there's a conspiracy and a cover-up.